I never thought the loudest gunshot of my career would come after 3 straight hours of nothing but stale coffee, rain on the windshield, and silence. One moment I was half dozing in the driver's seat, the next I was face down in the mud with someone's gun skittering out of their hand while I screamed at them to drop the magazine. Yeah. Welcome to my life. I worked for the SBU, short for Sluzba Bezpeki Ukraini, the security service of Ukraine. If you don't know what that is, think of it as a weird mix between the FBI, the Secret Service, and counter-terrorism units rolled into one. People hear police and think traffic stops or drunks on a Friday night. That's not us. We dealt with spies, armed smugglers, organized crime, terrorists, and all the things you only see in news headlines before they vanish into silence. We weren't cowboys, but we weren't regular cops either. We were the guys you didn't notice until suddenly you did, and by then, it was already too late. That night started like 100 other nights. Me and my partner were on surveillance duty, parked near an old warehouse by the river. Intel said it was inactive, but our informant swore there was a shipment moving through guns, maybe drugs, maybe both. We didn't know yet. We just knew to watch, record, and wait for backup if things went hot. The problem? Waiting is the hardest part. You sit there, hours crawling by, your coffee goes cold, your brain starts convincing you nothing will happen. And then, right when your guard is down, the world explodes. It was just past midnight when the first van rolled in. Headlights cut through the rain, tires splashing through puddles, sliding up to the loading dock like it had done this 100 times before. I sat up straight. My partner killed the inside light and grabbed the camera. 2 men got out, hoods up, moving fast, practiced. Then another car. Then another. Within 5 minutes there were 6 men unloading crates from the back of the van, stacked with military precision. Not random cargo. This was organized. I radioed it in, low and steady, target confirmed. Multiple packages. At least 6 individuals. The line crackled back, hold position. Backup en route. Hold position. The 2 most hated words in surveillance. Because when you see weapons coming out of crates and men pulling sidearms like they're just tools of the trade, every instinct in your body screams not to sit still. And sure enough, one of them spotted us. Maybe it was the reflection off the lens, maybe dumb luck, maybe my partner's cough. But the guy froze, pointed directly at our car, and shouted something in Russian I couldn't mistake. There. Everything after that was chaos. Gunfire ripped through the windshield, glass raining into my lap as I slammed the engine into reverse. My partner dove sideways, camera clattering to the floor. The first rounds cracked the dashboard, sparks flying. My ears rang. Adrenaline took over. I threw the door open, rolled onto the wet pavement, and drew my sidearm. Bullets sparked off the hood, chunks of metal flying into the night. I remember the insane clarity that comes when your brain knows it might not survive. Time slows. Every sound sharpens. I saw the man aiming at me, a pistol in his hand, steady grip, not some amateur. I squeezed the trigger twice. He dropped behind a crate, shots echoing into the empty streets. Someone shouted orders. Boots splashed in the puddles. My partner yelled, "Move! Move!" and we scrambled toward the nearest cover, a stack of rusted barrels by the fence. Rain hammered down. Muzzle flashes lit the night. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it over the gunfire. And in that moment, it hit me, this wasn't just another boring surveillance gig. This was a full-blown firefight, and we were outnumbered, outgunned, and cut off. And it was only the beginning of the longest night of my life. People like to imagine gunfights are like in the movies, slow motion, heroic one-liners, the good guys always hitting their targets. In reality it's noise, chaos, and trying not to die while your brain screams at you to make decisions faster than you can think. The warehouse yard turned into a storm of muzzle flashes, ricochets sparking off metal, crates exploding into splinters. I pressed myself against the barrels, rain soaking through my jacket, and fired blind around the corner just to keep their heads down. My partner was beside me, swearing under his breath, fumbling with the radio that was now spitting nothing but static. Backup was supposed to be 10 minutes away. 10 minutes in a firefight feels like 10 years. One of the smugglers shouted something, orders, maybe calling for reinforcements, and 2 shadows broke off, flanking toward us. I saw the shapes moving low, fast, trying to pin us in. I yelled, left side, and dropped one with a lucky shot that cracked through the rain. The other hit the ground and fired back, bullets hammering the barrels so hard I thought they'd burst. My partner leaned out, put 2 rounds in his direction, and the shooting stopped. For a moment, only the rain. Then the sound of an engine roaring to life. The van. They were trying to pull out with the shipment. If they got away, this whole night would be for nothing, and we'd be stuck writing reports about how we lost a crate of military rifles to organized crime. My instincts screamed to stop them. I broke cover, sprinting across open ground toward the vehicle, water spraying under my boots. Bullets snapped past me, sparks exploding off the concrete. I dove behind the side of the van just as it lurched forward. I grabbed the handle, yanked the door open, and came face to face with a man holding an AK. For half a second we both froze. Then he lifted the barrel and I reacted the only way I could. He shoved my pistol into his chest and fired. The blast inside the van was deafening. He collapsed against the seat, the rifle clattering away, and I scrambled in to hit the gear shift. The driver swung at me, fist connecting with my jaw so hard I saw stars, but I slammed the gear into park and the engine screamed before stalling out. My partner reached me seconds later, yanking the driver out and pinning him to the wet pavement. But there was no time to celebrate. More men were pouring out of the warehouse, their silhouettes backlit by the flickering security lights, weapons raised. At least 4 of them, maybe more. I ducked behind the van as rounds tore through the metal, the air thick with the smell of gunpowder and wet asphalt. "Where the hell is backup?" I shouted over the noise. My partner just shook his head, eyes wide, pressing his back against the wheel well. We were 2 men with sidearms against a small army, and the only advantage we had left was desperation. I remember thinking, if we don't hold them here, they'll disappear into the city with enough firepower to start a war. That thought alone kept my finger steady on the trigger as I leaned out again, aimed at the closest shadow, and fired. The firefight was far from over, and we hadn't even seen the real threat yet. Adrenaline does weird things to your brain. You don't think in full sentences, you think in fragments, shapes, sounds, survival. I remember the sharp hiss of rounds tearing through the van's thin metal, the sting of glass as a bullet shattered the rearview mirror, the metallic taste of fear at the back of my throat. We were pinned down, and every second we stayed there was another second for them to reposition. My partner was crouched low, muttering, we can't hold this," while trying to reload with shaking hands. The rain was pounding harder, drumming on the roof, washing blood off my sleeve I hadn't even noticed yet. I peeked around the van and saw them advancing, methodical, trained, not just street thugs. These guys knew how to move. 2 were laying down suppressive fire while another 2 fanned out wide. If they circled behind us, we were finished. "We've got to move," I said, grabbing my partner's shoulder. He shook his head like I was insane. "Move where?" And then we both heard it, the creak of the warehouse side door opening, the echo of boots on wet concrete. More of them. At least 3 shadows spilling into the yard, one carrying what looked like a shotgun. My stomach dropped. We were being flushed out. They wanted us stuck in the open, trapped between the van and the barrels, no way to retreat. My partner cursed, grabbed the radio again, screamed coordinates into the static, begging for backup. Nothing but dead air. I made a choice then, the kind that either gets you killed or turns the fight. I shouted, "Cover me," and before he could stop me, I broke from the van and sprinted toward the crate stacked near the dock. Bullets kicked up fountains of water around my feet, one slammed into the metal railing inches from my head, but somehow I made it, diving behind the nearest crate with my lungs burning. From this angle I could see deeper into the yard, and what I saw made my blood run cold. They had heavier weapons. One guy was dragging out an RPG tube from a duffel bag, the kind you only see in war zones. My heart seized. If they got that off, there wouldn't be a van, a yard, or even us left to worry about. I steadied my pistol, lined up my shot through the rain, and squeezed the trigger. The man dropped before he could shoulder it, the launcher clattering uselessly to the ground. The others shouted in panic, firing wildly in my direction. My partner took the distraction to sprint over and slide into cover beside me, panting, soaked, eyes wide with disbelief. "You're out of your damn mind," he said, but there was a flicker of relief in his voice. The crates weren't perfect cover, they splintered under the rounds hitting them, but at least we weren't sitting ducks anymore. The smugglers regrouped fast, dragging the RPG back and yelling orders. These weren't random criminals. Whoever they were, they had training, discipline, and a shipment worth killing for. My partner finally got the radio working long enough to spit out a broken message, "Shots fired, multiple hostiles, need immediate backup," before static swallowed it again. The only answer we got was the continued stutter of automatic fire cutting through the night. And that's when I realized, if we didn't end this fast, nobody was coming in time to save us. The crates were starting to give way, splinters flying into my face with every round that slammed into them, and I knew we couldn't stay pinned there much longer. The smugglers were regrouping, shuffling in the rain like wolves circling prey, and sooner or later one of them was going to make a clean shot. I signaled to my partner, pointed toward the yawning mouth of the warehouse, and mouthed, "Inside." He gave me a look that screamed, "Are you insane?" But he knew as well as I did that it was our only shot. On three we broke cover, sprinting through the downpour, boots splashing, rounds cracking past us. I felt one slice the air by my ear, close enough to burn, and then we were through the door, shoving it closed behind us. The inside was pitch black except for a few flickering overhead lights, a hum of ancient machinery, and the echo of our ragged breathing. My eyes adjusted just in time to see rows of stacked pallets, shipping containers, and a maze of shadows that could be hiding anything or anyone. The smell of oil and mold clung to the air, mixing with the sharp tang of gunpowder from outside. We pressed against the wall, guns raised, listening. At first all I heard was the drip of water through a leaky roof. Then, footsteps. Not ours. Fast, deliberate, closing in. They were coming after us. My partner whispered, "They're not letting us walk out of here alive." And he wasn't wrong. This wasn't about chasing us off. We'd seen too much. They couldn't risk us identifying the shipment, the weapons, maybe even their faces. We pushed deeper into the maze, moving container to container, trying to stay ahead of the echo of boots. I caught glimpses of shadows darting between aisles, the glint of a rifle barrel in the dim light. Every nerve in my body screamed trap. Suddenly, a burst of gunfire lit up the dark, tearing through the container beside us. Sparks flew, the metallic clang deafening. We dove behind a stack of wooden pallets as rounds chewed them into splinters. I rolled to the side, leaned out, and fired back blindly. My partner did the same, the flashes from our pistols illuminating terrified faces for split seconds before they vanished again. One man went down with a groan, but two more kept advancing. Then I saw it, a stairwell at the far end, leading up to a catwalk that overlooked the entire warehouse. If they got up there before us, they'd have the high ground, and we'd be rats in a maze. "Catwalk," I hissed, and we sprinted. Gunfire followed us, rounds sparking off metal, ricocheting into the dark. My boots pounded the steps two at a time, lungs on fire, until we burst onto the walkway above. From here, we had sightlines. From here, we could make a stand. My partner dropped to one knee, taking aim at the shadows below, while I scanned for movement. That's when I saw it, dozens of crates, neatly stacked, each stenciled with markings I didn't want to believe. Military grade. Ammunition. Explosives. This wasn't just a smuggling op. This was an arsenal, big enough to arm a small army. My stomach clenched as I realized what we'd stumbled into. And almost immediately after, the warehouse lit up again with muzzle flashes. The smugglers had spotted us on the catwalk. Bullets clanged off the railing, sparks raining down, and we hit the deck, returning fire in short, desperate bursts. The catwalk shuddered with every impact, my ears ringing from the echoes in the metal cavern. We were hopelessly outnumbered. My partner shouted over the noise, "We're not walking out of this." And for the first time that night, I almost believed him. The catwalk shook under us with every impact, bullets whining off the railing, sparks raining down into the dark like fireworks, and all I could think was how thin the metal felt under my stomach as I hugged the floor trying not to get my head blown off. My partner was returning fire in bursts, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack, and below us the shadows of men moved like predators, darting between crates, fanning out. They weren't panicking anymore, they were coordinated, angry, methodical. Whoever was running this operation hadn't just hired street thugs. These were professionals, and we had stumbled right into their nest. I crawled toward the far end of the catwalk, trying to get a better angle, when one of the smugglers stepped into the open below. He had a shotgun and he wasn't aiming at us, he was aiming at the supports. The roar of the blast echoed through the cavern as buckshot tore into the metal. The catwalk jolted so hard it nearly threw me off. My stomach dropped. "They're trying to drop us," I shouted, scrambling to my knees and firing down at him. The man staggered back, but another took his place immediately, spraying rounds at the bolts that held the walkway in place. The groan of stressed steel filled the air, and suddenly every step we took felt like walking on glass. My partner cursed, grabbed my arm, and yelled, "We've got to move, now." We bolted down the catwalk, boots clanging, as more gunfire hammered the structure. Behind us, the metal shrieked like it was about to give way. I felt the whole thing sag, my balance wobbling, my chest pounding as we sprinted toward the far stairs. Just as we reached them, a burst of fire shattered the railing, and my partner slipped, grabbing the edge with one hand as his gun tumbled into the darkness below. I lunged, caught his wrist, and pulled with everything I had. Bullets snapped past us, sparks showering our faces, the catwalk groaning louder with every second. With a grunt, I dragged him up, both of us stumbling forward and half falling down the stairs into the shadowy ground level. We landed hard, gasping, but alive. For now. The warehouse echoed with taunts in Russian, deep, mocking voices calling us out, telling us we wouldn't leave breathing. I gritted my teeth, clutching my sidearm, knowing we were down to a handful of rounds between us. My partner's face was pale, his chest heaving, but his eyes burned with the same thought I had: we weren't going to surrender. Not here. Not to them. Suddenly, the sound of wood splintering ripped through the noise. One of the smugglers had pried open a crate, pulling out what I feared most: assault rifles, fresh and oiled. They were arming themselves with heavier firepower, and we were about to be hopelessly outclassed. I pressed my back to a container, breath ragged, and whispered, "We're screwed." My partner gave a bitter laugh, wiping blood from his forehead, and muttered, "Yeah, but if we're screwed, let's make it expensive for them." I checked my pistol, 4 rounds left. He had 3. That was it. Not even a magazine between us. And outside, backup was still nowhere. Then, just as my pulse hit the edge of panic, I heard something faint in the distance. Not gunfire. Not voices. A siren. Faint, distorted by rain and metal walls, but unmistakable. Backup was finally close. Hope flickered in my chest like a dying candle. But judging by the smugglers' shouts, they heard it too. And that made them desperate. Which, in some ways, was even worse. The faint siren in the distance should have felt like salvation, but instead it was like throwing gasoline on a fire. The second the smugglers realized backup was coming, their restraint vanished. They opened up with everything they had, bullets screaming through the warehouse, sparks flying off steel beams, crates exploding into showers of splinters. The air turned into a storm of noise and smoke, the smell of gunpowder mixing with oil and rain. My partner and I ducked behind a container, clutching our pistols like toys compared to the rifles hammering our position. "They're trying to finish us before backup gets here," he shouted over the roar, and he was right. We were pinned, trapped in a pocket of flickering light while shadows moved like predators through the aisles. I risked a glance around the corner and saw one of them sprinting low, an assault rifle in hand, covering another who was lugging something heavier. My blood froze. It wasn't another RPG, but a box marked with Cyrillic letters I knew too well: explosives. They weren't just trying to kill us, they were planning to torch the whole place, shipment and all, to erase evidence. If they detonated inside, we wouldn't just die, we'd vanish. I fired, dropping the carrier, but his partner returned fire so violently I had to yank my head back before it was blown off. The sirens were closer now, but they still sounded miles away. We needed to hold just a few more minutes, but we barely had bullets to last seconds. My partner checked his mag and muttered, 2 left. I had 3. 5 rounds total between us and a dozen men armed to the teeth. My hands were shaking from adrenaline, my ears ringing from the constant concussive cracks. The warehouse was a nightmare of echoing gunfire and shifting shadows. Then the power cut. The flickering overhead lights died all at once, plunging everything into near total darkness. The only illumination came from occasional muzzle flashes, bursts of orange lighting up faces twisted with rage, glints of metal, sprays of debris. My partner cursed, fumbling in the dark, and I whispered, "Stay low, move slow." The dark was a curse for them too, they couldn't see us any better than we could see them. I crawled forward, heart pounding, listening to the crunch of boots on glass and debris. A shadow loomed ahead, and for a split second I froze, unsure if it was friend or foe, before instinct took over and I fired. The flash blinded me for a heartbeat, but the grunt and thud that followed told me I'd hit my target. 2 rounds left. My partner fired once somewhere behind me, and I heard another body hit the ground. The smugglers shouted, disoriented, their voices echoing in the cavernous dark. They weren't coordinated anymore, they were angry, panicked, and reckless. That gave us the smallest chance. I crawled along the container edge, feeling my way, when suddenly the darkness erupted with blinding light. Floodlights. From outside. Backup had arrived, vehicles surrounding the building, beams slicing through broken windows. The smugglers shouted in shock, some firing blindly toward the lights, others scattering deeper into the warehouse. Relief hit me like oxygen after drowning, but it was short-lived, because backup was still outside, and we were still inside with cornered men who'd rather burn everything than surrender. And then I heard it, the unmistakable metallic click of a grenade pin being pulled. The click of that grenade pin was louder in my ears than the gunfire. My stomach dropped, my whole body freezing for half a second before instinct screamed at me to move. Somewhere in the dark a man shouted, the metallic clatter of the grenade bouncing on concrete following immediately after. "Down!" I roared, shoving my partner hard behind a stack of crates as we dove flat to the floor. The explosion ripped through the warehouse like thunder, a concussive wave of fire and smoke blasting my eardrums. The shockwave slammed me against the ground, my vision going white for a heartbeat, lungs burning with dust. Splinters of wood and chunks of metal rained down, some slamming into my back hard enough to bruise. I coughed, ears ringing, the world muffled like I was underwater. When my sight cleared, I realized the grenade had blown apart one of the container stacks, scattering debris across the floor and opening up a wide lane straight toward us. They weren't trying to scare us, they were clearing a path to finish us off. Shapes emerged through the smoke, rifles raised, advancing fast. My partner fired his last round in cursive, fumbling for a spare mag he didn't have. I had 2 bullets left. 2 against 3 men closing in with full auto rifles. My brain was a storm of panic, screaming, "This is it, this is where you die." But muscle memory took over. I aimed steady, ignored the chaos, and pulled the trigger. 1 down. I shifted, fired again. Second one dropped. Click. Empty. The third man raised his rifle and time froze until the warehouse lit up with a hail of gunfire from the catwalks above. Backup had finally breached, tactical teams pouring in through the doors and windows, their floodlights and rifles cutting through the smoke like salvation. The third smuggler went down in a spray of bullets, and suddenly the tide had flipped. Shouts in Ukrainian filled the air, commands barked, boots thundering, disciplined bursts of gunfire as the SBU assault team pushed in. My partner and I stayed down, hands over our heads so we didn't get mistaken for hostiles, while chaos erupted all around. The smugglers fought hard, spraying rounds, some trying to flee through side doors, others screaming as flashbangs detonated. The air filled with acrid smoke, burning powder, and the stench of sweat and fear. I crawled to my partner, his face pale and streaked with grime, and shouted, "It's over, we just need to stay alive another minute." But inside, I knew it wasn't over. Cornered men with explosives don't just give up. And sure enough, as the assault team cleared section after section, I caught sight of one of the leaders, bigger, calmer, ice cold, dragging a heavy pack toward the center of the warehouse. I knew what was in it. Explosives. Enough to bring the entire building down on everyone inside. He shouted orders in Russian, 2 of his men covering him as he wired the pack to the crates. My heart lurched into my throat. Backup was here, but if that charge went off, it wouldn't matter. We'd all be buried in a fireball of ammo and steel. My gun was empty, my partner unarmed. All I could do was watch, praying someone on the team would see him before it was too late. And then his eyes locked onto mine across the chaos. He smiled. A slow, deliberate smile, like he wanted me to know exactly what he was about to do. That smile across the warehouse froze me more than any bullet ever could. It wasn't the grin of a man trying to escape, it was the calm of someone who had already decided to die and take everyone else with him. My blood turned to ice as I saw him kneel by the crate, fingers working with terrifying precision on the wires and detonator. I screamed, "Bomb," but my voice was swallowed by the thunder of gunfire and boots. My partner grabbed my arm, trying to drag me back toward cover, but I couldn't move. If he finished arming that pack, the whole place was gone. Backup was still pushing in from the flanks, floodlights cutting through the smoke, operators shouting commands, gunfire rattling in short bursts. They didn't see him. They were focused on the firefight, not the quiet monster wiring death in the center of the room. My empty pistol felt like a stone in my hand. I dropped it, grabbed a length of rebar that had fallen from the catwalk, and before my brain could tell me how suicidal it was, I ran. I tore across the floor, boots slipping in blood and water, explosions echoing behind me. One of his men spotted me, raised his rifle, but a burst from an SBU operator cut him down before he could fire. I closed the distance, heart slamming, vision narrowing until there was nothing but the man and the detonator in his hand. He saw me coming, smirked, and reached for the trigger. I swung the rebar with everything I had, the metal crashing into his wrist with a crack that made my stomach lurch. The detonator flew from his hand, skittering across the floor into the shadows. He roared, lunging at me with a knife pulled from his vest. We collided hard, rolling across the concrete, his blade flashing in the flickering light. I felt it slice my sleeve, hot pain across my arm, but adrenaline drowned it out. I slammed the rebar into his ribs, once, twice, desperate, wild. He grunted but didn't stop, knife pressing closer to my throat. My partner appeared out of nowhere, tackling him from the side, the 3 of us hitting the ground in a tangle of limbs. the knife clattered away. The man snarled, headbutt my partner so hard I heard the crack, and threw him off. I scrambled for the detonator, sliding on my stomach, fingers clawing at the floor until I grabbed it. It was a crude device, wires twisted, buttons smeared with grease. My thumb hovered over it, sick with the realization that if it was still armed, even the slightest pressure could end us all. Behind me, I heard the man roar again, the scuffle of boots as he lunged, and pure instinct took over. I hurled the detonator across the warehouse as hard as I could. It clanged against steel and disappeared into the chaos. The man froze, eyes wide with fury, then turned back to me with murder burning in his gaze. He wasn't smiling anymore. He charged, and this time I was ready. The rebar connected with his face in a wet crack that dropped him like a sack of bricks. For a moment, everything went quiet except the pounding of my own heartbeat. Then the gunfire surged again as the last of his men tried to make a desperate stand. Operators flooded in, rifles barking, shouts echoing, the battle finally tipping for good. I staggered back, chest heaving, the rebar slipping from my bloody hands. My partner crawled up beside me, face pale, blood dripping from his nose, and croaked, "You're insane." Maybe I was. But we were alive, and the warehouse hadn't gone up in a fireball, at least not yet. When the last gunshot finally echoed into silence, the warehouse felt like the aftermath of an earthquake, smoke hanging low, puddles of blood mixing with rainwater, splintered wood, and shattered glass crunching under boots. My chest was heaving so hard I thought my ribs might crack, ears still ringing from the explosion, arms trembling from adrenaline and pain. Backup operators fanned through the aisles with rifles up, calling clear. Clear, while dragging surviving smugglers to the floor, zip-tying wrists, shouting commands. The floodlights outside bled into the building, turning the haze into a strange, blinding glow. My partner leaned against a crate, his face pale under the grime, blood trickling from a cut on his scalp. He tried to light a cigarette with shaking hands and gave up, muttering, "We should be dead." He wasn't wrong. I looked down at my own arm, sleeve soaked red, and only then did the pain hit full force, sharp, hot, radiating. I clenched my jaw, forced myself to stay upright. Medics would come, but first I needed to see it through. One of the commanders strode in, barking orders, his face stone. He shot me a glance that said he'd ask questions later and waved his men toward the center of the warehouse. That's where the real work began, opening crates, documenting, photographing. I staggered closer, curiosity and dread battling in my chest. We already knew it wasn't drugs. We'd seen the rifles, the RPG tube, the explosives. But when the first crate was pried open and the lid clattered to the floor, I felt my stomach lurch. Inside wasn't just weapons, it was military tech. Night vision optics, encrypted radios, body armor with markings scratched off. Another crate held anti-tank mines, still in grease. Another, boxes of high-caliber ammunition stamped with foreign serials. This wasn't small-time smuggling. This was a pipeline, a direct feed from somewhere far beyond Ukraine's borders, funneled into the hands of men who clearly knew how to use it. My partner leaned over, spat blood onto the floor, and whispered, "Jesus Christ. This isn't local. This is international." He was right. You don't get your hands on toys like these unless governments, militias, or very powerful syndicates are involved. And the men we just fought weren't some ragtag gang. They were trained, disciplined, maybe even ex-military. My chest tightened as the realization sank in, we hadn't just stumbled into a smuggling ring. We'd walked right into the edge of something much bigger, something we weren't supposed to see. One of the operators called me over, lifting another lid. This time it wasn't guns. It was paperwork, ledgers, documents sealed in plastic, USB drives taped under the crate walls. Names, numbers, transactions. Evidence. Enough to unravel whatever shadow network was feeding this war machine. My blood ran cold as I recognized some of the signatures, businessmen, politicians, people I'd seen smiling on TV like saints. My partner looked at me, eyes wide, and whispered, "If half this is real, we're in way over our heads." And for once, I didn't have an answer. The commander ordered the evidence bagged, the warehouse sealed, survivors hauled out for interrogation. Medics finally reached us, patching my arm, bandaging my partner's head. But even as relief washed over me, a heavy dread settled deeper. We had survived the night. We had stopped the shipment. But the real story was only just beginning, and it was far uglier than either of us had imagined. The next 48 hours blurred into one endless interrogation room, hospital corridor, and debriefing session. My arm was stitched, my partner's head wrapped, but sleep never came. We were hauled from one office to the next, asked the same questions by different faces in different suits. What did you see? Who fired first? How many men? What crates? What markings? What names? We answered everything until our voices cracked, but it never felt like enough. The higher-ups weren't celebrating. They weren't patting us on the back. They looked tense, angry, worried. Because the evidence in those crates didn't just point to smugglers, it pointed to people with power. Politicians. Businessmen. People who smiled into cameras and shook hands with ministers. I remember one colonel slamming his fist on the table and muttering, "This should never have been found. Not like this." That line haunted me more than the gunfire. We'd risked our lives to stop a shipment, but instead of feeling like heroes, we felt like witnesses to something we weren't supposed to see. My partner joked weakly, "Guess we're getting promotions, huh?" But his eyes said he didn't believe it. Neither did I. The official report painted it differently. According to the paperwork, it was a standard operation, a routine bust, 6 smugglers apprehended, weapons seized. No mention of the grenade. No mention of the bomb. And definitely no mention of the ledgers with names too big to touch. Those files vanished into a folder marked classified before we even left the warehouse. I never saw them again. What I did see was the change in the way people looked at me in the hallways. Not pride. Not respect. Pity. Like I had stumbled into a room I wasn't meant to enter, and now everyone was waiting to see if the door closed behind me or if it crushed me instead. Weeks later, my partner put in for transfer. Said he wanted out before the job ate him alive. I didn't blame him. He'd wake up screaming some nights. I'd hear it through the thin apartment walls we shared on rotation. I had my own nightmares, the smile of that man with the detonator, the feel of his knife sliding toward my throat, the sound of my pistol clicking empty. But worse than the dreams was the silence. No one talked about the warehouse. No one mentioned the crates. Officially, it was just another bust, filed away like a traffic report. Unofficially, it felt like we'd stepped on a landmine buried deep in the state's foundations. I stayed with the SBU, but I was different after that night. More cautious. More suspicious. I learned to keep my mouth shut, to trust fewer people, to never assume the enemy was only outside the walls. Sometimes I wonder if that night changed my career, or if it just opened my eyes to what it really was all along. People think working in intelligence is glamorous, heroic. They imagine James Bond. But most of the time it's coffee going cold in the rain, paperwork stacked to the ceiling, and the quiet knowledge that when the bullets do finally fly, nobody will ever know the whole story. Not the public. Maybe not even your own family. That night, in that warehouse, I thought survival was the hardest part. But I was wrong. The hardest part was walking out alive and realizing survival didn't mean safety. It meant carrying the weight of secrets too heavy to share. And that, more than the firefight, more than the bomb, more than the blood, is what still keeps me awake at night.